Welcome back, Daisy Cakes, to my list of top 100 science fiction authors. I am your hostess with the mostest, Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I've curated this list of top 100 science fiction authors, put them in alphabetical order, and broken them up in groups of 10, and this is part 5. We're starting off with a big name, Frank Herbert. Herbert was born in 1920 and died in 1986 at the age of 65. Of course, we will have to talk about his seminal novel, Dune, but this book did not suddenly appear out of thin air in 1965 when it was first published as a novel. Herbert was actually a writer in the golden age of science fiction, publishing in the pulp magazines, Astounding, Amazing, Fantastic, and so on, since the 1940s. Dune is actually a fix-up of 2 serialized stories published separately in Analog magazine. When it was published in 1965 as a novel, it won the inaugural Hugo Award for Best Novel. Yes, that means it was the first Hugo ever awarded. It's the story of Paul Atreides, born on the lush planet of Caladan, but destined to be the leader on the planet Arrakis, also known as Dune, the source of spice, which allows interstellar travel and psychic visions. Herbert crafted this story to explore environmentalism and ecology and to warn against religious messiahs. Now, I don't believe a sequel was ever planned, but after winning the Hugo and following its huge popularity, Herbert followed Dune up with 2 sequels that I think are also worth reading, Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. This is a perfect trilogy in my opinion, but Herbert went on continuing the saga with a few more books. I read the 4th book, God Emperor of Dune, but after that I was like, I'm good. I don't need to read anymore. It's been adapted as a movie several times. I actually like the 1984 David Lynch version, but the recent films by Denis Villeneuve with Timothée Chalamet as Paul Atreides has been very well received and gotten a lot of acclaim, even though I had a few issues with the movie. Moving on, Donna Barba Higuera is a contemporary author of children's books, who I am excited to include in this list because how are new sci-fi writers born? They often come from picking up novels aimed at the juvenile readers, like Robert Heinlein's Juveniles, or Madeleine L'Engle's Wrinkle in Time, or Lois Lowry's The Giver. And trust me, I'm trying to break into the juvenile market and say with some authority there aren't many science fiction novels published these days aimed at kids, but Higuera has broken through with The Last Quintista, published in 2021. It's about a group of people lucky enough to escape the dying Earth aboard these huge ships bound to colonize a planet that can support a human population, but everyone has to go into stasis. One of those is 13-year-old Petra, who remains conscious for part of the journey and listens to stories someone has downloaded into her tank. She also becomes aware that something weird is going on with the crew that's awake that runs the ship, going through some sort of rebellion, revolution, something. Anyway, when she wakes up hundreds of years later, a dystopian totalitarian government is in charge of the colonists, and many of those deemed potentially rebellious have been purged. That is, they're dead, including Petra's mother and father, and all the knowledge of old Earth that's deemed dangerous, jettisoned as well. Quintista means storyteller, and Petra is the last one alive who knows the stories. Are there still good science fiction stories getting published for kids? Read The Last Quintista and get back to me. Moving on from a modern writer of science fiction to a very early writer, we come to Aldous Huxley, the English author born in 1894 and died in 1963 at the age of 69. He was not a very prolific writer, and most of his novels aren't really well known, except for one, Brave New World, published in 1932, which really has become the grandfather to all modern dystopian novels. Orwell's 1984 was published over a decade later. And I think the novel holds up today. Even though its depiction of women is a little dated. The story is set in a far future London where a totalitarian government oversees babies being born in artificial wombs, and it keeps the population under control through the use of a drug called Soma. One man, Bernard, is a bit of a free-thinking rebel who visits New Mexico, which has a reservation for savages, which means people born wild and not civilized. He takes one of the savages, a man named John, back to London. Can John, who has grown up wild and free, survive in the civilized world? It's a pretty bleak book, but if you are a fan of the dystopian subgenre, you should read the novel that started it all. Moving back to the 21st century, let's talk about Kazuo Ishiguro, born in Japan in 1954 and raised in Britain. His first name, Kazuo, always gives me pause because my mother's name is a female version, Kazuko. Anyway, Ishiguro is a literary writer, nominated 4 times for the Book Award. He won once for Remains of the Day, published in 1989, and he also won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2017. The science fiction novel I want to talk about is Never Let Me Go, published in 2005. If you haven't read this already or know the story, I'm not going to say much about it because I went into reading it blind without knowing much about what it was about, and it had a pretty strong impact on me. So I want you to do the same. I'll only say it is set in near contemporary times, and it's about a girl named Kathy who grows up in a school for special children, not really knowing why they are special. That's it. That's all you need to know. Pick up a copy and read Never Let Me Go. The next author is what I would call a writer to watch out for, a rising star. Her name is Emily Jane, and she doesn't even have a Wikipedia page yet, but from her website, we know she went to law school in San Francisco and now lives in Cincinnati. Her debut novel blew me away, On Earth as It Is on Television, published in 2023. The writing is quirky, the story is humorous and a little surreal. It's about first contact with aliens, and we follow the effect with an eclectic group of characters, a man who just wakes up from a coma, the husband of a supermom, a teenage girl filled with ennui, and cats. Yes, cats. If you want to have a fun time, check out On Earth as It Is on Television. I am sure everyone knows N.K. Jemison by now. Jemison was born in 1972 and was a practicing psychologist before becoming a full-time writer. She's one of those writers I like to think I found because I picked up her debut novel, The 100,000 Kingdoms, in 2010. This was a novel in a fantasy series known as the Inheritance Trilogy, but her next trilogy was science fiction and is already a classic. I'm talking about the Broken Earth trilogy that starts with the 5th season, published in 2015, followed by The Obelisk Gate in 2016, and then The Stone Sky in 2017. This is the only trilogy where all 3 books won the Hugo. All 3! Oh, an interesting little factoid is this amazing and acclaimed and popular series you'd think would have made Jemison rich. Well, the advance she got for each book was $25,000. That sparked a lot of conversation of what, or more pointedly, why publishing would give such a low advance. Could it have anything to do that Jemison was a Black woman? Questions were asked. Anyway, these books are about a far future Earth where there is a 5th season of extreme climate change that literally shakes the world. We follow the storylines of several characters until we reach the jaw-dropping conclusion. Some people call this fantasy. I call it science fiction. I'm sure it's a genre blend of some sort, but it's not one you want to miss out on. I have to thank one of my followers, Evie, for this next one. Thank you, Evie. Simon Jimenez is a Filipino-American born in 1989. The first novel I read was his 2022 fantasy novel, The Spear Cut Through Water, and I admired the risks he took in this unconventional storytelling, and I liked its literary style, but just for me, the structure of the story threw me out of being able to suspend my disbelief. Anyway, I hesitated to read his 2020 debut novel, The Vanished Birds, but I am so glad I did. The novel was, or is, a masterpiece. It's divided into 3 parts and kind of reads like 3 separate novellas, each with a different point of view character, but they are so tightly integrated that it's like reading a full trilogy. Part 1 is about a backwoods planet and a man named Kada, who grows from child to adult and is obsessed with this woman, space merchant named Nia, who arrives at his planet for trade every decade or so and never seems to age. When a spaceship lands on the planet and a mysterious child survives, he gives the child to Nia, who raises him on her ship. And that's part 2. The third part is about a woman named Fumiko Nakajima, who is so ancient she spends most of her time in stasis and has an interest in this foundling. Each part has its own literary style. It is a remarkable work, and I strongly urge you to check out The Vanished Birds. Here's a name I bet you don't know. Kenyon, born in 1956 and has been publishing since 1997. She is one of those great science fiction authors that seems to fly under the radar. Though a couple of her standalones have been nominated for awards, Maximum Ice was a 2003 Philip K. Dick Award nominee. The Braided World was a 2003 John Campbell Award nominee. But the series I read that I think is absolutely terrific is a series called The Entire and the Rose, which starts with Bright in the Sky, published in 2007. This is a story of a starship pilot, Titus Quinn, whose wife and daughter are presumed dead. But Titus doesn't think so. He thinks they are lost in a parallel dimension. In fact, he woke up on a far-flung moon raving about his wife and daughter. Everyone thinks he's mad. That is, until a sapient machine of the Minerva Corporation finds a tunnel to another dimension. Now they're knocking on Titus Quinn's door. The writing is smooth, the story is intense, and I think more people should know about The Entire and the Rose series by Kenyon. Here's one I bet many of you have already read. Ernest Cline was born in 1972, and his debut novel, Ready Player One, published in 2011, instantly became a classic. It takes place in a near-future dystopia where pollution, poverty, overpopulation has taken a toll on the planet that's now suffering from intense climate change. Life in the real world is not good, which is why everyone escapes to the virtual world of Oasis. When the creator of Oasis, James Halliday, dies, he leaves control of Oasis to the person who can solve a puzzle in the virtual world that he embedded in the game. What makes this such a fun read, especially if you're of a certain age, is all the references to Dungeons & Dragons, classic video games. Everything is spread throughout the Oasis. Steven Spielberg adapted this into a movie which did okay in the box office. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I would call a Spielberg classic. But if you like cyberpunk, gaming, virtual reality, and 80s references, I think you'll love Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. We end here with Mur Lafferty, who was born in 1973 and has been a successful award-winning podcaster since 2004. But before that, she was a writer for White Wolf and other role-playing games, which I find very interesting. She's been writing novels since 2007, but I found her with Station Eternity, published in 2022, which I picked for Shelve It or Shove It, because it has this amazing retro science fiction cover. This is a genre blend between cozy detective mysteries and science fiction. It's the first in a series called The Mid-Solar Murders, kind of like Midsummer Murders. Get it? Get it? Each novel is a standalone with a different mystery to solve, like a Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot or Nero Wolfe, but set in space. Our detective is Mallory Viridian, who seems to always be around when someone gets murdered. And she seems to have this preternatural ability to solve the murders. Makes her a great detective, right? Well, not to the police, who begin to get suspicious that so many murders are occurring around her. So she moves out to a space station, Station Eternity, which is like this Babylon 5 type outpost for different alien species. Anyway, she wants to get as far away from the human race as possible, but of course, trouble and humans seem to follow her everywhere. The next novel, Chaos Terminal, picks up where Station Eternity left off, but with a different mystery to solve, but with that same amazing type of retro cover. I really like this group of 10. We have classic and early writers, some contemporary and very new writers, and even a children's writer. Have you read any of them, or do you want to read any of them? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you also read fantasy, don't forget to check out my list of top 100 fantasy authors. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.